everybody. I'm really glad to have you here, even though I can't see any of you. So I'm just imagining a great crowd of people out there listening and watching. The good thing about this presentation is if it gets a bit boring, you can just look at the pretty pictures. And I've got about 60 slides, so I will try to be quick. So anyway, this is hosted by Alberta Equestrian Federation and myself, and away we go. So just a little bit about me, because sometimes you go to these things and you haven't got a clue who the speaker is. So very briefly, I went through Pony Club, and then I evented at intermediate 3-day level. I bought, trained, and sold horses for 20 years. And then in 2010, I was kind of done with the performance world, and I learned to pack. And I spent 4 seasons wrangling for outfitters up in northern BC. I've since done about 30 pack trips. Some of those have been solo. And then I've written 3 books about horse camping and pack trips. And so you get me here tonight with pretty pictures and hopefully some useful information. So first off, because packing and riding and camping can be dangerous, there's a disclaimer here that essentially says that if you listen and watch this presentation, I'm not liable for any injury or death that may occur from your choices to go out and try horse camping or ride your horse. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about different types of horse camping, where to camp, a bit about emergency planning, what sort of horse you might want to take and the skills they might have, gear you need for your horse and yourself, and then a bit about how to do lightweight trips and pack trips, as well as further resources that you could take a look at to help you out. And just a reminder, I guess, that everybody does things differently. So it might be that you hear something in my presentation that someone else has told you maybe isn't the way to do things. So we all do things differently, and the information that I'm choosing to share is what has worked for me. But you can learn other information elsewhere, and there's no right or wrong. There's just maybe the best way for that particular trip or set of circumstances. So horse camping, lots of people have lots of different definitions for that, and there seems to be a bit of confusion about what that actually is, but it's just staying away from home with your horse somewhere overnight. And so for lots of people, they've already done that. You might have gone to a horse show or a clinic, you've kept your horse in a pen, you've camped in your trailer, and there you've been horse camping. So it's not sort of some big scary thing. There's different ways to do it. That's one way. We're going to talk about more of the trail riding style and going out into the bush, but there's tons of different ways to do it, and I would encourage you to just take a crack at going out and camping with your horse in whatever way you're comfortable. The types of horse camping that we're going to talk about, the first one is what lots of people call rig riding. So you trailer to a horse campsite or a clinic or a trailhead, you camp overnight, and then you do day rides from there. And it's kind of a nice way to do things because you've got everything set up already, and you just come back every night. Then there's lightweight trips. So then you have one horse, and you're packing everything on your horse as well as riding that horse. They tend to be sort of from A to B. That's a little more challenging. And then there's the pack trip, where you ride one horse and you pack another horse. And that's sort of what people have this romantic view of going off into the mountains and seeing spectacular scenery. And there's a sort of a skill set that goes with that. So we're going to talk a little bit about each of those, depending how fast I am. So what do you need to go horse camping? Well, you need a plan. Then you need some sort of transportation, or a friend that has transportation. Or there's other ways we can do it. The next slide, we're going to talk about that if you don't have a truck and trailer, because I know that's a barrier for some people. Then you need some form of horse accommodation. You need feed and water for your horse. You need rider accommodation, and then the rider needs food and water, some sort of kitchen, and you definitely need an emergency plan. So first of all, it's making the plan. So who are you going to go with? And what sort of trip are you going to do? And even if it's, you decide you're going to do a lightweight trip, so just with your one horse, is it just going to be a weekend? So it's one night overnight? Or are you going to go from A to B for 5 days? Or are you going to do like a pack trip where you ride into one place, you pack into one camp, and then you stay at that camp and you rig ride for a couple days and then you pack out? Or are you going to do an A to B pack trip? I mean, there's all kinds of different options, right? So deciding on a partner and the type of trip, then when are you going to go, depending on the weather and how much time you have available, what the access is to where you want to go, and then how to do the trip. So practicing the skills that you need before you go. Oh, and I forgot to mention, so for each of these photos, I've tried to put where they are, because people always ask that, and maybe I'll spend a bit more time looking at the photos rather than just thinking about what to say in the slides. So where to camp? So yeah, this photo is a wreck site in BC. It was kind of a funny story. I was on this trip along the Trans-Canada Trail, 550 kilometers with this one horse, all my gear on the one horse, and I rocked up to this wreck site, and the guy was absolutely thrilled. I didn't know whether it was legal to camp there or not, but he was totally thrilled. I said, "Can I camp overnight?" He said, "Yeah," and he, I don't know, it was $18 or something, and I got my own little site set up my tent and had a picnic table and led the horse around, and he grazed and the kids patted him. So there's all kinds of different places where you can camp. I've camped at bed, bell, and breakfast, so they're set up specifically for horses and people who want to camp overnight. I've contacted someone through Airbnb who happened to be in a rural area, and they had a 5-acre field. They didn't have any horses or animals. I camped there. You could camp at, a friend's backyard, rodeo grounds, show grounds. There's national parks, provincial parks, wildlands, crown land. So tons of different places that you can camp. Obviously, the most usual are the horse campsites that BC and Alberta have that are set up specifically for this purpose. But for your first trip, you might want to stay close to home, because then if something goes wrong, you can pack up and go home, or if you forgot something, you can just run to your house and go get it. If you don't have a truck and trailer, you can just ride over to a friend's place, set up your camp overnight, figure out what works, what doesn't work, what gear you need, what you don't need. You could just go down to a local agricultural grounds, try it out there, and you'll find out what skills your horse has and what they don't have. I mean, if you're going to tie them overnight and they paw all night, it's a great way to try it out without being too committed. So horse accommodation, again, there's all kinds of different options. This was at Writing on Stone. That particular pen obviously is movable, but they have fairly permanent pens there. So different places might have permanent pens or stalls, and stalls are often standing stalls, not box stalls. You could take portable panels on your trailer. You could take an electric fencing system, which is super easy. Trailer tie arms attached to your trailer and then stick out about 4 feet, and you tie your horse to those. You might tie your horse to a hitching rail or your trailer or a tree or a post overnight. You might high line, which is just what it sounds like. It's a high line between 2 trees, or a trailer and a tree, or 2 posts, and then you tie your horse to that. You might decide to picket, which I don't recommend, but it's an option. So that's tying your horse by either a foot or its halter to a stake in the ground. It used to be quite popular. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, so I don't recommend that, however. Or you could hobble. And I know it sounds funny for hobbling to be under accommodation, but hobbles are where you tie your horse's feet together in some way, the front feet. And that does provide accommodation if you're going to hobble in the mountains overnight. I think I talk about those a little further on. So permanent pens, these are at Barkerville. They're very nice. Pens and standing stalls, this is at Cypress Hills. So there's pens in front, and then there's standing stalls in the back there. This is at Yaha, there's standing stalls there, very nice ones. And you can see where you can use a tarp overhead to give your horses a roof. You might tie to a hitching rail. This is at Grasslands National Park. Quite a few horse campsites just have hitching rails to tie to overnight. You might decide to picket. This was on a month-long ride through Morocco, and we had 13 horses, and they were all picketed overnight, and pretty much every night one of them would pull a picket, and 9 of them were stallions, so it was always exciting. Or hobbles. This is my favorite type of hobble. There are many different kinds. The reason I like these so much is because I use them outfitting up north. They work when it's wet, they work in the snow, they work when it's frozen, they work in the mud. You can operate them with frozen fingers and gloves on. You can cut them off if the horse gets into trouble, and they tend not to chafe. So one of those things you want to train at home, but that's a pretty handy skill for your horse to have. That's just a hobbled herd in Blue Creek Valley in Jasper National Park. So then feed and water. If you're rig riding, it's pretty straightforward. You just take what you need from home, whatever it is your horse usually eats, and the way of getting it to them, whether that's buckets or hay nets or whatever. And then for water, wherever the water is available, you can take it with you. You probably don't have enough space to take enough water for your horse. So for non-potable water, you find whatever water source there is. Then I want to talk a little bit about carrying feed on lightweight trips or pack trips, because people ask me this a lot. I don't carry feed. I carry salt and electrolytes, but I don't carry feed. I rely on grazing. And the reason for that is if you think about how much a horse eats in a day, so say we're going to do a pack trip when we have one riding horse and one pack horse for me. So they're going to eat 25 pounds each of feed a day. That's 50 pounds. So there's no way that I can put that on a pack horse. The other problems with carrying feed are it does encourage other critters to come and eat your feed or come into camp and bother you. So I'm not a big one for carrying feed. Some people carry a bit of grain for enticer to bring their horses in. Other people carry maybe a few cubes. There are some parks that require you to carry feed, usually weed-free and usually pellets. I found a collapsible water bucket really handy, and the reason for that is even on a lightweight trip, often there'll be a water source, but you can't get your horse to it. So you can go and have the water run into the bucket and then carry the bucket to your horse. But essentially, you find water wherever you find it. So it might be you have a rainy day and there's puddles wherever you're going. Well, the horse will drink out of the puddles. That's just part of traveling. So then rider accommodation, it really depends on the trip you're doing and how you're doing it. So if you're going to a ranch or something, you might be able to rent a cabin and then rent a pen for your horse. And there's like horse camping deluxe, right? But other options are you might have a camper on your truck. You might have a living quarters trailer. You might sleep in your truck or trailer. That's all for rig riding. If you're heading off on a pack trip, this is a picture in Bob Creek with a friend. We had 3 horses, 2 riding horses, 1 pack horse, and we each took tents of our own. So you're going to be sleeping in a tent. Unless you, again, pack into an outfitter's place where you can rent one of their cabins. There are a couple cabins in different parks that you can ride into, but they're few and far between. And then the food in the kitchen. So this is kind of a typical kitchen setup of packing. So we're just around the fire there. There's a couple stumps and pack boxes, and my friend there is looking at a map. So If you're rig riding, you might have a fridge and a stove and a sink, so a real kitchen. If you're rig riding like I do, then you probably just have a cooler. But some people have larger stoves, barbecues, Dutch ovens, whatever it is they want. And then the food situation, again, I'm kind of a lightweight person. I like to travel far and light. So I do a lot of, for a lightweight trip or for a pack trip, I do a lot of dry food and have a really lightweight gas stove. Sometimes I'll cook over a fire. That may or may not be an option depending where you're going and whether there's fire restrictions. And then, if you're going on a weekend trip and it's your first time and you don't want to be bothered with a stove, you're going to survive if you just take a bunch of bars, like just take some of those power bars and protein bars and just make up a breakfast of bars and a lunch of bars and dinner of bars. Like, you're not going to die. So you could easily go and do a weekend trip, a lightweight trip, try it out. Just take bars. Don't bother with the whole cooking business. But then I'm a lazy cook anyway, so. Okay, so emergency planning. This is not rocket science, but it's really important. The way I do it is I make a list of potential hazards. So you can write these down. Whatever comes into your head. You're driving there, you get a flat tire. And then you show up and you're pitching your tent and a bear shows up. And then the next morning you find out that there was a porcupine in camp and he chewed through your latigo. Then you're out on the trail and weather craps out and you get lost. And then someone falls off and, twists their ankle, the horse loses a shoe, whatever. So then you've got your list of potential problems. Then you want to just create plans of what are you going to do if that happens. And so that part of that is skill, part of that is what gear are you going to take, and part of that is choices that prevent those things from happening. That's kind of how I do it. Figure out the hazards, what are the what ifs, and then how are you going to deal with those things. The other thing you'll need is that I recommend, is a communication system and an emergency contact list. Just remember that cell service is not everywhere in Canada, especially in the wilds. I use a spot beacon. Some people use inReach systems, but have some sort of system so that if there is a genuine emergency, there's a way of you getting out. Then the other part of your emergency plan is having a designated emergency contact person at home and plan with them of what you're doing. So if you're supposed to show up on Sunday night and you don't, and it's Monday morning and you still don't show up, what are they supposed to do? If you don't show up at Sunday night at 8 o'clock, are they supposed to call the RCMP? Are they supposed to wait 24 hours? Are they supposed to call somebody else? So you have to have a written plan that tells them what to do if whatever. So be prepared for the consequences of your choices. This was kind of an unpleasant swim that I was taking a picture of, fortunately for me. Bears tend to show up in Western Canada anyway, so have a plan for them. Okay, so let's switch gears now. For any of these trips, because this is sort of a trail riding, horse camping presentation, you're going to need a riding horse. A riding horse that's sane and sound and ties and trailers that fits you, so it's not too small, not too big. It's good with other horses if you're not going by yourself, and it's suitable for the riding you plan to do. And that might be different, that horse might need different fitness and skills depending on the trip that you're planning. Fit for the job. So I'm kind of adamant about fitness, maybe a little more than other people. So it takes at least 3 months to get a horse fit for a long day ride. And that's, science has shown that it's kind of the same as you getting fit off the couch to go and do a 10K or a long hike. And the purpose of fitness, the good thing is that it's fun, right? You get to go out and ride your horse and work on your fitness together. But it also prevents injuries. Horses are expensive, care is expensive, vets are expensive. So it's a pretty good preventative measure. It also means you can ride your horse more and hike less. And especially on long trips, your horse is your safety. So, for myself, when I'm out there on a solo pack trip and I'm 200 kilometers from the nearest road or person by myself, they're my safety. So their fitness really matters, and the choices that I make really matter. So try to, get your horse fit for the job. Don't assume that it can just go out and do a trail ride, because that's just walking down the road or down the trail. Then there's a bunch of mandatory horse skills. And these are skills that I just consider broke horses should have, but that's not always the case. So they need to be able to tie and trailer and settle into new places. They need to be happy to drink anything. They need to be keen to eat and graze. The gluttons are really good trail horses. Poop and pee, stand quietly, safe to get on and off, just all around sane. That's the horse you want. This is a little horse I had. You could tie him anywhere. He'd just fall asleep. That's the type you want. And then you also want to have a relationship with your horse. So, lots of times we see people doing stuff with horses. They'll carry a flag or drag a barrel. And it's really not what you can do with your horse, but it's what your horse will do for you when you ask. So this was a bridge. It's in Summerland. It's on the Trans-Canada Trail. And it's kind of a tourist railway now. So the train comes along, it stops in the middle of the bridge and hoots its horn. And so we kind of have to plan to not be there for that. But it's also a little sketchy for horses to go across. There's lots of bikes and hikers. It's really far off the ground. And so, being able to ask your horse to do something like that and have them go, okay, I think that's all right because I trust you. That's really the type of horse that you want. So you need to be able to cross whatever it is that comes along, whether that's a bridge or going through water or mud or past cows or other horses or mules, through gates, ATVs, bikes, whatever. There's a whole variety of things, but it's more about the relationship that you have than the things that happen. So this was a little trip into Jasper, and it was early July. That creek was really pushy. It was higher than normal, and I decided it'd be safer to take the hiker bridge. I hope people at parks don't see that. This was on the Trans-Canada Trail. It was one of, I can't remember how many trestles there are through Myra Canyon, but one of the many. And by that time, my horse was kind of cool with them. So trail riding gear, horse gear, what do you need? So we'll just kind of rattle this off. Everybody does this differently, but this is what I use. I use a rope halter underneath a bridle, and there's a rope, lead rope tied to the rope halter. Then I use a breast collar to prevent the saddle sliding back. When you're going uphill, I use a Western saddle pads, cinches. I use a back cinch, and I use ugly wide stirrups because I ride in hiking boots. I think, actually these days I'm riding in endurance stirrups because they are a little more comfortable. But anyway, then pommel bags, which I don't have in this picture, and saddlebags. I carry hobbles on my horse, and at that time I was using chain hobbles. They're around his neck. I don't use chain anymore. And then shod or boots. I usually have shod horses in the mountains and then carry a boot in case they lose a shoe. Usually I have a bell around their neck for bears, and then an axe and a saw depending on the trail. So this is kind of a typical riding horse setup. I actually just have pommel bags there, not saddlebags, and I'm using pommel bags a lot more these days because the weight, I think, is in a better place than on their loins, which are one of the weaker places. That horse has a bell on, you can see it around his neck. So gear in the saddle and pommel bags, and again, this depends on the trip you're doing, how long it is, where you're going. Depends whether you have friends with you that you can share some of this stuff with. You can see on this horse, I've got an Australian saddle on him and a little hatchet. And then I just have saddlebags, no pommel bags. So, every setup's a little bit different. But here's the list. So I've got food and water at the beginning, along with purifying tablets for water if you need them. Then I've got extra clothes, especially waterproofs, first aid, emergency blanket, toilet paper, a headlamp, very handy, a fix-it kit, which is pretty basic, a fire starting kit in case you end up somewhere in crappy weather and need to get warm, a camera, a hoof pick and hoof boot. Now, you don't need a hoof pick if you have some sort of multi-tool. Bear bangers and bear spray, a map, a compass, flagging tape, and GPS. Oh yeah, so my starred things are maybe if you want them. I rarely carry a GPS. I'm really not very GPS friendly. But anyway, some people are far more skilled at GPS work than I am. Sunscreen, lip chap, fly spray, some sort of multi-tool or a knife, hobbles, and binos. Okay, so then what the rider should carry on their person. So this is kind of a funny photo of me. We were up in the, this is on a 3-week trip in the Rockies, and I was getting a little chafed in the important parts. So I've got some pink long johns on there, and then I realized that I couldn't ride with pink long johns on without either something over top because I wasn't wearing any undies. So then I had to borrow a pair of shorts, and I usually ride with hiking boots and gaiters to keep the crap out of my boots. So this is kind of funny wear, but anyway. So what the rider should carry on their person. So something I carry all the time in like a pouch that slings around kind of over my shoulder. It's like a travel pouch, so you don't want to get pickpocketed. That's what I use for knife, lighter, beacon, and a whistle. So the beacon is the spot beacon. And I wear that all the time, and it's in the tent with me at night. So I'll wear that even on a day trip, because pretty much if I lose my horse and I just have that, I should be okay, in theory. So then a hat that keeps the rain and sun off, sunglasses, waterproofs, warm wears, gloves, footwear for walking, gaiters, chaps if that's your thing, and bear spray. And riders need skills too. And this is definitely something that you can work on yourself. So I guess at the beginning when I was talking about who am I, growing up I did a lot of hiking and camping and skiing and sailing and getting out into the bush. And so those are skills that are pretty useful if you're going to go out and do a pack trip. And they're skills that you can go and practice without your horse. However, you also need to know or need to have the skills to plan the trip, get the gear together, train the horse, and then there's that little bit of how to pack the horse. And then there's the wilderness skills, being able to cook on your stove and sleep in your tent and find your way down the trail, and how to assess risk. Some of those you can practice, some of them you can take clinics if you want to learn how to pack, or you can send your horse for someone else to train. So there's lots of different ways to get those skills. You also need to be fit. And I hike a lot. I hike uphill to save my horse. I hike downhill to save my horse. I hike if I lose trail, if I'm trying to route find. Sometimes I think it's more of a hiking trip with a horse tagging along than it is a pack trip with me riding. But anyway, if your horse goes lame, you need to hike out. And that's happened to me a few times. It just does. Horses go lame. And if your pack horses are packing all the gear that were on the lame horse, then guess what? You get to walk. So my rule is, for me, I have to be fit enough to hike the trip as though I didn't have any horses. That's just my rule. but it's safety to me. It saves your horse, it prevents injuries, and because your horse is your safety, then it's up to you to also be a solid partner to your horse. Whew, that was a lot of information. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, there was that resource list that was provided by the AEF, I think by email, but I've also got a couple of lists, the same lists in this presentation, because it's going to go online for organizations, Facebook groups, and books. So there's a bunch of organizations. If you're outside BC or Alberta, say you're in the States, I recommend that you look up your local backcountry horseman organization. It started in the States, so that's a good option. There are other trail riding groups across Canada, and I can't help you if you're in Europe. There are also a selection of Facebook groups that are good places to connect with people, find out where people are going, get information about horse campsites, sometimes learn new skills, although skills by social media aren't always the best way to learn. But there are lots of groups out there and lots of friendly people, and I've used Facebook groups and those organizations to help plan trips before, because often those members know their local areas where you might want to go. And then there's also a bunch of books. I've written 2 of them. One of them, here. Oh yeah, so Go Horse Camping. A friend and I wrote that because there wasn't anything out there. So that's a nice cheapy $20 book that has a ton of appendices in it for lists, because that's a big question that people always have is, oh, I've got this great long list of things to take. What am I missing? So those are in there. Yeah, okay. So then we'll move on from kind of trail riding, rig riding to one horse lightweight camping trips. So for these trips, you're going to put everything on your horse as well as yourself. So this is where fitness is really important, fitness of, for yourself and for your horse. Less weight is better. So science has shown, I'm sure some people have read the science that says when you have greater than 25% of the horse's weight on it, so if it's a 1,000-pound horse, that's 250 pounds all up. Once you get over 25%, the horse starts changing its gait. So it's obviously affecting the horse. So the lighter the better, because 250 pounds is not very much for me with all my gear. So there's a bunch of stuff that you might not want, and then there's other gear that you might need, depending on the type of trip that you're doing. And the food often becomes one of the heaviest things, so just try to go as light as possible. Use dehydrated meals, like what lightweight hikers are using, or buy fresh along the way that you know you're going to eat right away. And then for water, collapsible bucket for your horse, and then some sort of purification system for the rider. So what I've used for that is I've used purification. I've drunk out of water that was so awful. I used purification pills, and I boiled it. And I did something else. I might have filtered it as well. I was just so concerned. However, there's lots of different systems. A little research will help you with that. And all that goes on one good horse. And then when you rock up to the grocery store and buy too much food, suddenly your horse becomes a pack horse and you get to hike. So that's lightweight trips. Now, if you want to go on a pack trip, so you can see here, what have we got? 2 riders and 2 pack horses. There actually is another rider coming along who took this photo. She might have a pack horse on this trip too. So what else do you need if you're going on a pack trip? Well, you might already have the gear if you've tried a lightweight trip, or if you do hiking trips. But for a pack trip, you need a pack horse. And then you also need skills for wilderness travel and living, because most pack trips are into the wilderness. What do you need for a pack horse? Well, they need to be able to lead and tie, pony from another horse. You need to be able to pack them, and they need to do whatever the lead horse does. So it's fairly straightforward job. Lots of horses can be pack horses. Depending where you're going, you might want a kind of a sturdier type, like this draft cross that's in front here. And I know some people don't like to see muzzles on horses like that, but the reason for those is so that when you're leading your horse along, they're not constantly diving for grass and bushes and yanking your arm out of its socket. It makes the trip a lot easier, and obviously that muzzle comes off so that they can graze. So pack horse gear, you can go and do a packing course to learn how to pack, but essentially they need, you need a pack saddle and pad, you need cinches, a breast collar, a crupper or britchin to hold the saddle back when you're going downhill, pack boxes or bags or mantees, some sort of top tarp, and then a lash rope and lash cinch to tie it all down. Or, you know, if you're doing some simple front country trip, not through a whole pile of brush, you could potentially just have a Western saddle on your pack horse and sling a couple of duffel bags on it and figure out how to tie it all down, and hey presto, there you've got yourself a pack horse. Yeah, just personal choice. This was a little practice trial run up a logging road once with a friend who wanted to mountain bike, and so we decided to see if this guy would pack a bike, which he did just fine. Those pack horses or pack boxes are sitting really low, and the reason for that is so that we had a flat surface for the bike. Usually they're up a lot higher, and this is something that I see a lot. I learned to pack with heavy loads with outfitters, and we want the weight on top of the horse. We don't want it on the side of the horse. So the pack boxes on my pack boxes, the way I pack is to have those pack boxes up as high as possible so that the load's on top of the horse. If you put it down on the side like this, and then you throw a diamond on to lash it all down, the boxes actually squish the horse like in sideways. There's other knots you can use to prevent that, but when you have the boxes slung low like that and you're trying to go through tight trees, you're going to hit more trees than if you have them up high. So that's just a little aside. So how many pack horses do you need? 2 people can share one pack horse for 1 week. So if you're going to go for 6 or 7 days, 5 days, whatever, you just need 3 horses. You need a riding horse each for 2 people, a riding horse each, and then 1 pack horse. So I always say, you know, if one of you has a 3-horse trailer, you could head off on a pack trip. It's not a problem. If you're going to do a longer trip, then the basic rule is 1 pack horse per rider. But definitely take as few horses as possible. I mean, the more horses that you have to wrangle in the bush, I'll tell you, it's just more trouble. So it chews up the trail more. You end up grazing the camps down faster. So the less horses you take into the bush, the better. And then the other thing is to pack as light as possible. And, you know, everybody packs differently. And the way I pack is as light as possible. So I do not do the cast iron pots and Dutch oven and canvas tents and all that crap that has a long historical life, and that some outfitters still use, lots of people who pack still use. It's just not how I do things, and the reason for that is I just don't want that weight on my horses. You know, the lighter I can get with all that basic gear, the more food I can put on them. So I can pack 1 horse for 4 weeks, and the reason for that is because I have really light gear, and the only thing that I'm doing is putting food on them the longer I go. So I'm not a fan of that heavy gear. You know, I've even gone from leather saddlebags down to canvas saddlebags because they're that much lighter. You know, you can just save your horses. Your horses are doing less work, and that means they're less likely to get injured. that's just my little spiel about keeping it light. One of the skills you need is, many skills that you need are about wilderness living and travel. So knowing your skills and knowing your limitations is really useful. Having human and horse first aid training. You can practice your outdoor skills at home. And essentially plan well, take the right gear, and act wisely. Lots of things can go not so right. Trails can be hard to find. This is in Wilmore Wilderness. It can be exhausting for everybody. That's also in Wilmore Wilderness. The views can be amazing and well worth the effort. This is the Upper Brazo in southern Jasper National Park. More of the Upper Brazo. This is Twin Tree Lake in Jasper National Park. This is Police Meadows in Assiniboine. This is on the Cascade Road in Banff. Okay, but if you don't have any gear for your pack horses, I tell people this a lot. It costs about $1,000 to get gear for one pack horse. And I totally get it. Like, if you're not going to go packing every year, at least once, why would you want to spend $1,000 on gear that's going to sit around? Maybe you try it once and you don't like it. Maybe your horse doesn't like it, whatever. So get a group of people together, or if you have a backcountry horseman chapter, or if you have a, excuse me, a trail riding group, get your group together, scrounge up $1,000, buy a set of packing gear, if that's what you all decide you want to do, and then just sign it out to members. So, I mean, you have six people, they all want to learn how to pack. You know, Joe can try it for a couple weeks, and then Dave can try it for a couple weeks, and then Susan can try it for a couple weeks. Like, then you get all your horses trained, then you can go on pack trips, you know, even with one set of gear, you can go on a week-long pack trip with one other person. So it's a great way to share the cost and be able to try it out. You can try it out, practice at home. Maybe you love it, maybe you hate it, but it would be fairly inexpensive that way. This is the other book I wrote, Pack 'em Up, Ride 'em Out. And I wrote it because there was no guidebook for pack trips in BC and Alberta, so now there is one. And if you have any questions, I am happy to answer them. I'm hoping Ashley's going to jump in and start rattling them off.
Hi, Tania. Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you so much. I think everyone is just amazed by all the photos.
Excellent.
It's really stunning. I'm just looking at that last one there. Yeah. So there were a couple questions and comments as we were going. And one of the questions is, what about English saddles? Are there many people that do packing that would be riding English? Or do you suggest, is that dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to answer that. You know, you could certainly do a lightweight trip with an English saddle. So, absolutely. You know, there's pommel bags and cantle bags that you can put on English saddles. So, you could even do a pack trip with an English saddle. The reason for using Western saddles is because they spread the load. So English saddles, and I have an English background, you know, obviously it depends on the saddle, but close contact saddles aren't really meant to be sat in. They're meant to be doing a jumping position in. Dressage saddles are not meant to be ridden in for hours and hours. So essentially the Western saddle just spreads the load across your horse's back. And so there's less pressure per square inch. But there's no reason that you can't do a trip in an English saddle. You know, the other things you might want to consider are you happy riding up and down on the side hill and all that through mud and water with your English saddle? And not because it would wreck it necessarily, but just are you comfortable staying in the saddle during all of that? but there's no reason why not.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And someone else asked if you know of any mentors in Ontario, or if you've done any packing yourself in Ontario.
I have not done any packing in Ontario. I believe there are a couple of horse camps in Ontario, maybe 3. And I'm thinking of one of them, I can't remember the name of it, where they have done some clinics, some packing clinics. So I would say yes, there are, if you look up horse camps in Ontario, I think one of them is Saugeen Bluffs, maybe. I don't think that, well, I can't remember if that's the one where they've done pack trips before, but there's 3 horse camps in Ontario specifically for horse camping, and I know one of them, they have done pack clinics before. So do a bit of research.
Okay, that sounds great. And next question, a good question. What are some of your favorite foods when you're packing?
Well, as I said, I think I'm a pretty lousy cook at the best of times, so I'm not all that picky about what I eat. However, let's see, breakfast, I make up these breakfast cookies ahead of time, and they're kind of like everything in them. They have like dried apricots and nuts and oats and all kinds of stuff. So you can easily make bars or cookies or whatever for your breakfast. And then I also make my own beef jerky, and I do some almonds or trail mix type stuff. So that's usually breakfast. I absolutely can't stand oatmeal, but sometimes I force myself to eat it because it's really light. That's usually breakfast. Lunch, I have a very strange tradition, but I eat the same thing for every single lunch on every single pack trip, and that is wraps. So I take a wrap, put butter on it, sliced cheese, salami, because cheese, salami, and butter all keep regardless of the weather, it seems. They don't seem to go bad very easily. So I eat 1 or 2 of those for lunch. And then everyone's going to think I'm crazy, but anyway. And then dinners, same thing. I often make up my own dehydrated dinners. So I'll have some sort of carb. So whether it's noodles or rice, usually it's one of those prepackaged jobbies. And then I'll add some kind of meat if I can. Sometimes that's canned, but not very often. Usually I do my own dried ground beef ahead of time, and then I rehydrate it. And then I add in some dehydrated veggies. Sometimes they're fresh veggies. And some sort of spice, and mix it all up and make a 1-pot meal. That's generally dinner of, it's a one pot dinner of some variety. So it's not elaborate or particularly expensive or very special, but that I'm not very picky. So
you sound hardcore. I thought for sure in those saddlebags there'd be an espresso machine or something, but that sounds great. So I know you showed us a picture at the beginning of the hobbles that you liked for all the different weathers, but someone's just asking for your favorite brand of hobbles, and also if you have a favorite horse boot, and like an easy boot type, like for over the foot.
Yeah, sure, I can answer that. Yeah, those hobbles don't have a brand because people in northern BC make them. So, what am I going to say about that? Yeah, if you know someone handy, just show them a picture. They might be able to make you some. They're made of biothane with a chain in between, and the only trick really is the length of the chain. The guy who makes mine probably doesn't want me to put his name and contact information out there. So I can't really help you with the brand of hobble. It's more a type, but I bet someone could make you some. That's the end of that.
Very resourceful.
What's that?
Very resourceful.
Well, lots of outfitter stuff is made. I mean, the breast collar I use, I made myself, the chaps, the saddlebags, the hats. I mean, I wanted I knew exactly what I wanted and I couldn't find it to buy, so I just made it. And that's pretty common. So anyway, then there was a question about boots, and man, everybody likes different boots, but I'll tell you the ones that I've used. I've used Easy Care boots, the Epics or the Grips for over 10 years now. I've used Cavallos on one 3-day trip because that's what the horse was used to. I know I have some Renegades, and certainly people who have gone into the backcountry in boots. I've seen them in Renegades and they've been very successful. I think it depends what you're carrying a boot for. So for me, I'm carrying a boot if they lose a shoe. And because I already have boots, my horses wear boots in fall, winter, and spring, and then I shoe them in the summer. So I already have the Easy Care Epics that fit my horses. So that's what I'm going to be carrying.
Awesome.
So,
and then we've had a lot more interest in the boots and the hobbles while you've been chatting about it. Are you able to go back to the slide with the hobbles? Just they would like to see the picture. And then
sure.
also, I think there may be a resourceful person or two tuned in because they're asking, how long is the chain in between the hobbles?
Yeah, I think it's 7 links. I'll just see here. Did I miss it? No, it's under accommodation. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 links. Yep. And then the metal pieces are just spot welded together. And then that's biothane. I've had someone make some that wasn't biothane, and the plastic they used was really sharp and cutting, so you want a nice rounded edge, and that biothane seems to work well for that. And then there's you can see that white plastic block that's riveted in between. That, I don't know what that's made of, it's just a white plastic block. And then that white block sits against a bar, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, that's great. And I'll just interject also, you touched on it briefly, but on the AEF website, albertaequestrian.com, if you scroll under the main pictures, shop AEF, you can find Tania's 2 books, Pack 'em Up, Ride 'em Out, as well as Go Horse Camping, so you can order them there if you're interested. And a couple people have asked if the presentation will be available. So please feel free to email info@albertaequestrian.com and we'll send that out to you. And then we'll just need a couple days, but we will have this presentation. It's been recorded, and so it will be on our YouTube channel in the coming days. And that's my little bit of housekeeping. And someone else has asked what your favorite trails are in northern BC. Are there any easy trails you would recommend for beginners to try?
Yeah, okay, so those are 2 different questions, but I'll answer them both. What are my favorite trails in northern BC? It does depend on the skill you have, but if you have good horses and you want a real backcountry trip, Spatsizi is one. Going into Jasper National Park, into Blue Creek, that would be another. The grazing's fantastic there, which is always a big deal. The scenery is spectacular. It's a couple days ride in. You could spend 2 weeks in there easy. There's lots of different places, but those are at the top of my personal list. For easy pack trips, like a first timer, super easy. Start at the Mount Sharp Trailhead, go into Mount Assiniboine or southern Banff National Park towards Palliser Pass, or even over into Brewster Creek. Those are really easy trips. Tons of people, really horse friendly for basic horses. You're not going to get lost. At least I'd be really surprised if you got lost. That's one. anything out of Fish Creek, Lake Louise, into Banff National Park, those are straightforward. Go west from Yahatinda, go up the Panther. What else? I guess those would be starting trips to me.
That sounds like a lot of area to check out. That's great. Similar question. Well, the comment from Adrian, a great way to try it out would be an outfitter like Moose Mountain or Rafter 6. These are Alberta outfitters. Do you have some recommendations for BC outfitters?
That's a really good comment, and I actually meant to say something like that, because that's another thing that I often tell people is, doing all this learning and getting the gear together and training your horse, and it's a lot of time and effort, and for something that you might think you're excited about, but maybe isn't what you end up doing in the future. So I tell people that a lot. If you think about what it is you want to do and why you want to do it, if you want to go and have the trip in the great weather and sit around camp and have a great time and not worry about horses, then I do really recommend that you hire an outfitter. Go on an outfitter trip. I mean, we do have great outfitters in BC and Alberta that go into spectacular country where you don't have to trail find and route find because they're going to take you there. And for the cost, whether it's $350 or $400 a day or whatever it's going to cost you, it's still going to be a heck of a lot cheaper than training your horse and potentially ending up with a vet bill and buying the gear and all that. So that's a really great option. Thanks for whoever brought that up. So outfitters in BC, I think it would be best to just do your research. And the reason for that is that everybody wants a different trip. So whether you want it to be a trip that's based at a lodge or that has cabins along the way or that is absolutely wild, whether you want a weekend trip, a 5-day trip, a 10-day trip, I'd say go online and do your research, because there's definitely some spectacular places to see in BC, and I can't think of a bad outfitter. How's that?
Oh, well, that sounds great and promising. Awesome. And one of the other questions, just they're asking where you can get a collapsible water bucket from, and I just did a quick search and found that even places like Canadian Tire, Sport Check even has them. But do you have any recommendations on a sturdy collapsible water bucket?
Yeah, just often they aren't called collapsible water buckets. It might be something like something for dishwashing, or it might not be specifically a collapsible water bucket for horses, but generally if you ask your tack store or an outdoor store, search around, like you said, Canadian Tire, they're definitely available. I don't have a particular brand that I care for,
Awesome. Well, that's great. That looks like it's kind of wrapping up the questions here. Like, a lot of people are just really thanking you for the great presentation, and they're really loving the photos. I think so many people are really dying to get out there after all of our lockdown from COVID. I think there was just another question here as I'm saying that. Is there a conditioning plan you have to follow, or recommendations for type of training needed for horses? A basic conditioning plan, you can just start walking, and if the horse is out of the field, hasn't done anything all winter, I generally hand walk for a week, 5 days a week, whatever, build it up. It doesn't have to be very long, 15 or 20 minutes. And then you might want to start riding, build that up for a week, up to 20 minutes of riding. And then you just start extending your riding time, and the basic rule is not more than 10%. You don't increase your ride time more than 10% per week. Sometimes that's 2 weeks, depends on the horse. But essentially at the end of a month so 4 to 6 weeks, you could be riding for 45 minutes to an hour to walk,
And then if you're, if it's going to be a trail horse, you can just start increasing the walking time, and build that up to the length of time that you think you're going to be riding. So if it is, if you're planning on doing a 6-hour trail ride, so this is something that I didn't talk about. My horses, what I count on traveling on trail is 4 kilometers an hour. So a 25-kilometer day is going to be 6 hours of riding time. So if you split that up and say you want an hour off for lunch, and say you have to stop and take a break, because that's what we do, it might take you 8 hours to go 25K. So if you think about that when you're building up your riding time, and have a goal and figure out how you can do that in 12 to 16 weeks. If you start now, you'll be ready in mid to late August to go and do a longer trip. Hopefully that helps.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. And I'll just read the last question here. Have you had great success with your spot locator? I have a funny story about my spot beacon. The first time I took it out to use it, it didn't work, which was kind of comical. But anyway, I use it to spot people at home. Like if I'm going on a trip by myself and I've said, okay, I'm going to spot you every couple of days so you can follow along, or I'm going to spot you every night or whatever. Yeah, I've had lots of success. I've used it for sending a question home when I had a horse problem, like, hey, what do I do about this? Can you Google that? So yeah, I'm a fan for sure. They're straightforward. After the first experience, I haven't run into any problems at all. Awesome. Well, that's great. We're glad you made it back. Well, yeah, I guess we will let you go, and just thank you so much for presenting to us tonight, and getting us dreaming about getting out on the trails. Yeah, you bet. It was fun, and I hope people took something away. And yeah, I definitely encourage you to get out there. Horse camping isn't as difficult as it might sound, but it does take a bit of planning and work.